Good afternoon. I'm Lina Ioannou, and I'm the International Relations Manager of Enterprise Greece. On behalf of the whole organizing team, I'd like to thank you for being here in the first event organized concerning the trade policy of the EU in collaboration with the Enterprise Europe Network and with the support of the permanent representation of Greece at the EU and the Office of International Relations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In this first webinar, which is going to be part of a series that we're going to organize in collaboration with the EN, we will have an overview of the EU trade policy focusing on two important free trade agreements, the one with the UK and the one with Canada. In the second part, we will learn about the tools for access to markets that is offered by the European Commission, and we will present a real case of a Greek company that is active in foreign markets using the tools available. So without further ado, I'd like to move on to the welcome remarks, starting with the Ambassador Ioannis Brailis, the permanent representative of Greece to the European Union since January 2002. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Greece in 1985. He has served in the permanent mission of Greece to the UN and twice with the Greek permanent representation to the EU. He has been Deputy Chief of Mission with the embassies of Greece in Tehran and Washington, and in 2012 he joined the EEAS and was appointed to the position of Deputy Head of Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations in New York, which he occupied until 2016 when he served as diplomatic advisor to the President of the UN General Assembly. In 2017, he became permanent representative of the European Union to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. He holds a degree in economics from the University of Athens and a postgraduate diploma in European Studies from Université Libre de Bruxelles. He speaks fluent English, French, and Italian. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and especially you, Mrs. Ioannou, since you're informing people about how old I am. And I'd also like to clarify that my Spanish is not so fluent. I manage, but it's not at the level of my other languages. So I'm going to start in English.
Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, since I am the first speaker, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar organized by Enterprise Greece and by the Enterprise Europe Network, ELAS, in cooperation with the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I would like to thank Enterprise Greece for this initiative, as well as for the invitation extended to the Greek permanent representation to the EU, as well as to me personally. Many thanks also to the Enterprise Europe Network, ELAS, for their support and co-organization. And last but not least, I would like to express my thanks and appreciation towards the officials from the Commission who spent time and effort in making this webinar possible, with the aim to achieve what I consider our common goal: to raise awareness of the EU common commercial policy tools that will support our exporters abroad and that will reinforce their competitiveness. I will now switch to Greek, having thanked everyone. I felt a bit like those actors who have just won an Oscar. I thank their family and the director of the movie and everybody.
Today's webinar focuses on the very important sector of trade policy, which is critical for boosting competitiveness in the EU, safeguarding strategic autonomy and resilience in its supply chains. In this regard, It is critical to promote trade agreements between the EU and other countries and to boost and strengthen the content of these agreements. The permanent representation representing our country at the EU and in collaboration with other member states and European institutions collaborates in shaping European strategies in various fields. The objective of today's event, though, is to offer information to Greek entrepreneurs on the important issue of trade agreements, free trade agreements, and also because this is very relevant to them. The participation of European executives is going to give added value to the information we want to provide to Greek businesses, and it also sets the tone for the excellent collaboration that we enjoy as the permanent representation with the European Commission. The European Commission is the institution that, when it announced the new external policy of the EU, focused on trade, security, and investments in business. On our behalf, we would like to state that we really want to take part and to organize other info days to be able to give even more information to Greek businesses. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs understands the priorities of business people in Greece and the problems that they face in markets abroad, and it wants to offer a lot of in-depth comprehensive solutions in Europe and outside. We are available to all Greek businesses to help them implement business proposals in collaboration with the European Commission and to help arrange meetings in the fields they're interested in. We're always available, and we encourage you to visit us as often as you can in Brussels. We would be happy to meet you, to listen to you, and to help you and provide information as much as possible. So, with the start of the tenure of the new European Commission and the new EU Parliament, we see the start of an important era for the EU, discussing problems that are going to be very important in the future. A lot of them have to do with the business community, such as geopolitics today and the fragmentation of geopolitics, the need for the green and digital transition, and, of course, the increasing effects of the climate crisis. We are in the midst of many challenges, and thus the collaboration between the private and public sector is a critical factor for the success in today's complex world. Thank you very much for being part of this and for inviting us here. And as I said, we're always available for more such initiatives and meetings, and we would like to see you in Brussels. Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellence, for being here and for your support. So we will continue with Mr. Dimitris Kalkas, the Secretary General for International Economic Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chairman of Enterprise Greece. He has also served as Secretary General for Public Investments and the NSRF at the Ministry of National Economy and Finance, and was a member of the Executive Committee of the Recovery and Resilience Fund and a member of the Board of Directors of the Hellenic Development Bank. Good afternoon, dear dignitaries, Your Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. I would also like to welcome you to today's webinar on the trade agreements of the EU, which is organized by Enterprise Greece with collaboration of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Enterprise Europe Network, Hellas. I would also like to thank Mr. Brailos, the my friend, and to thank them for all his help over the past few years on a political level. And in my new position now, he has always helped. And through Mr. Breiles, I would like to help all our collaborators at the permanent representation of Greece at the EU. And we are awaiting the maximum support possible in international issues. I think that the next few months or years, as regards international trade, are going to see great mobility internationally, and in the EU, all member states have to be ready to open up paths towards safeguarding European interests. And of course, we should never lose focus from the overall picture, which is to safeguard and maintain an open international trade system, the countermeasures for economic protections to the measure that they're not completely needed can actually not be to the benefit of all involved. We all understand what I'm talking about, what developments I'm talking about. On the other side, as regards the agreements for free trade, I believe that starting with specific agreements on a regional level, we can then later better safeguard an open international multilateral system. Today, alongside issues which are purely economic, we have security issues, and this has to do with energy security. And we saw this during the pandemic as well. We then also saw it with the successive geopolitical conflicts, and we should never depend for our energy or economy from a sole country. We need to differentiate our market mix and our presence. Extroversion, which is the strategy that we need to implement to be able to achieve this, is at the forefront of what we need, and it's critical to our survival and well-being. In this framework, the trade policy of the EU, through the free trade agreements, through the various initiatives for the safeguarding fair competition for our industry, play a critical role in promoting international trade, extroversion, and competitiveness for the EU. Free trade agreements are one of the most important pillars of the EU's trade policy. And this is how it supports European economies. It helps us shape a favorable business environment and boosts the trade and business relationships with other countries. Greek companies have seen over the past few years an important boost of their export activities, and they become even more established in Greece and abroad. And it's important to continue this and to promote this even further. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through an integrated network under its collaboration, which mainly includes the offices of financial and economic affairs at the various embassies and the supervised authorities such as Enterprise Greece and Export Trade Greece, supports the business community, as does the European Commission through the General Directorate for Trade and its representations. Today, we are launching a new cycle of seminars on these issues, starting with our trade agreement with the EU, UK and Canada. And next year, we will have such activities for other markets. These info days are part of a series of actions that aim to help Greek businesses be more extrovert outwards and to offer tools for their development. Of course, I should say that information should be a two-way process. So understanding the issues that businesses face and operating abroad, I want to ask the businesses that we have here to always feel free to address us and to my office or me personally, and to contact the network that I told you about before, and to the various economic affairs offices throughout the world to try to find solutions to their problems. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be here to attend this very interesting seminar. Thank you very much for your support for this initiative. I would now like to welcome Dr. Achilleas Barlas on behalf of EN Hellas. He is a coordinator of the Enterprise Europe Network Hellas. He oversees the activities of the Greek consortium and monitors the implementation of support services. As coordinator of the Innovation in SMEs unit at the Praxi Network, he supervises and monitors actions and initiatives, including those of the Enterprise Europe Network that promote innovation and enhance the competitiveness of SMEs. Mr. Barlas, welcome. Thank you very much for this great introduction. Thank you all very much for being here. Dear Ambassador, dear General Secretary, thank you very much for honoring us. We've been arranging this for a while with Enterprise Greece, and the requests of Greek businesses have been heard regarding the two countries that we've selected for today's webinar. We didn't choose them at random, but we asked businesses which are the two countries that you would be mostly interested in starting this series of seminars with. I hope, as we said, that this will continue. I think that today's great attendance shows us that there is a strong need for this for Greek businesses. They want to hear about FTAs and especially about the two countries that we started with, the UK and Canada. And I think this is a very good start, and we will continue next year with the other areas in which we have an interest. I would like to note that with Enterprise Greece, we started a couple of years ago a very close collaboration in quite a few fields that mainly concerned extroversion and supporting innovation and extroversion for businesses. And what we're organizing today is one of these actions as part of this collaboration. Our aim for both partners is to support Greek businesses in innovation and extroversion. And both partners daily, we receive requests daily from stakeholders who face barriers and problems in entering new markets and in their export activities. As the General Secretary said, we are all available, Enterprise Greece and the Enterprise Europe Network Hellas, to support these businesses. It's something that we do every day. Now, as regards the Enterprise Europe Network, I'd like to say, for those of you who don't know, that is the largest network to support SMEs in the world. It has about 350 points throughout the globe, not only in Europe, and it employs about 3,000 people. This essentially allows us to have people in every country and to be able to support businesses. And of course, this is lots of times in collaboration with Enterprise Greece or through Enterprise Greece in areas where businesses are interested in. Since 2008, the ENN Hellas has supported more than 4.2 million businesses, and a lot of them have received tailor-made investment solutions. More than 800 companies every day receive our services. In Greece, we manage to secure about one trade agreement per week. I would like to present just one slide which they sometimes say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think that this is it. You see the results of the recent questionnaire survey that we handed out to the beneficiaries of our services. Once a year we do this. I won't say much about the satisfaction rate. I think that this is quite evident. But I want to talk about the actual results that have to do with the increase of the turnover of companies. This is very good. This is one of the best results that we have seen across the network. In practice, this is achieved, as I say, by contributing to bilateral relationships across the board between Greek and foreign companies. And Enterprise Greece helps them all in this. We collaborate closely to support these companies. If you want, there's a QR code here. You can scan it from your phone and learn more about Enterprise Europe Network, or you can visit our nearest info point. That's all from me. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope everything goes well with this webinar. And of course, I want to see more of these webinars. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Barlis. And thank you very much for the very good collaboration we enjoy. Sorry about the delay in the schedule. I would like to start the main part of the event with the first unit, where we will see the free trade agreements between the EU and what the EU does. We were going to start with Mr. Peter Burrs, who joined the European Commission in 1993 and currently works in the Directorate General for Trade as head of the unit responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the European Union's external trade policy. Peter Burrs held various positions in the European Commission, working with third countries, in particular on transatlantic political and economic relations, including in the EU delegation in Washington. Before taking up his position in 2022, Peter Burrs was head of the units dealing with the European Union's trade and investment relations with countries in Asia. He was also chief negotiator for various EU trade agreements, including with New Zealand. Mr. Burrs, thank you very much for being with us, and we really want to listen to what you have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Enterprise Greece, for organizing this event. And thank you, Ambassador, Minister of Foreign Affairs, EN, for having me and my team, of course. We're very happy to join you today for hopefully the first of many events. In the European Commission, as was said, we are responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the EU's trade policy. But what is EU trade policy? Trade policy's aim is to create jobs, to create welfare, to support our economies through trade, but also to defend the interests of our companies, create a level playing field in the EU market, but also in third country markets. And how do we do that? We negotiate trade agreements, and we will hear later from my colleague Willem about the magnitude of trade agreements we currently have in place. We want to create open markets and further opening of third country markets through these trade agreements. But we're also reacting against unfair imports from third countries through, for example, anti-dumping duties and other measures to protect our interests. Turning now a few words on SMEs. They are at the heart of our trade policy agenda. We have more than 700,000 SMEs in the EU, and they support basically more than 13 million jobs. So out of these 700 European SMEs, around only 5% are trading internationally. The rest only within the single market. In Greece, 97% of total exporters are small and mid-sized enterprises. Only 3% are big ones. But in these, 97% account for more than a third of Greek exports in value. This is far above the average in the EU, but it also shows these numbers that there's a lot of untapped potential for Greek SMEs. Even if an SME is not exporting directly, often trade can matter to them because they are part of a regional or a global value chain and therefore take part in international trade as suppliers, upstream suppliers for bigger companies. So we see the need that we have to support SMEs. We have developed several policy initiatives and tools to facilitate the participation of SMEs in global trade. One element, as I said, are trade agreements that have a trade enhancing effect through creating preferential access to third country markets, be it Japan, be it Korea, be it New Zealand that was mentioned, or the latest preparation agreement. They lead to tariff elimination, they lead to trade facilitation provisions, reduction of red tape, customs simplification, and therefore reduction of costs. Inside these trade agreements, we have dedicated provisions for small and medium-sized enterprises to include, for example, commitments that we are transparent in what we do. What we and our trading partners are creating the awareness of such trade agreements and provide easy-to-read information of what we have negotiated. So in contrast to larger businesses, SMEs face particular challenges when engaging in international trade, most notably limited capacity to deal with complex administrative and regulatory procedures. In contrast to larger businesses, SMEs face particular challenges when engaging internationally, be it because they have limited capacity to deal with complex administrative and regulatory procedures, be it that they have limited access to information necessary to engage internationally. We have responded to these challenges to help SMEs in various ways. We have created in 2020 an online access to market portal. You'll hear about later the details of this portal that provides easy to read, free, hands-on information on all the conditions you face in third countries when you want to export. We have made it easier for small companies to complain to us, send concerns to us when they have problems facing access in third countries. We have created a chief trade enforcement officer to organize, together with our member states, implementation enforcement policy. And we go out into member states. We want to meet companies. We want to talk, hear from companies about their concerns, their worries, and what they have to say to us in terms of improving trade policy. And that's why we are here today. We are very happy to participate in this event. Me and my team are looking forward to today's discussion and to more events of this kind in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birch.
We're going to move on to the next speaker of this unit, Mr. Jan Willem Verheiden. He is a policy officer in trade strategy. He is an economist and lawyer by training and studied at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. He started his career at the European Commission in 2006 at DGT Internal Market, where he worked on the development of the internal market for services and e-commerce. He joined DGT Trade in 2013 and has worked as an EU negotiator, in particular for digital trade for different FTAs, including with the US and Japan. He then became a coordinator of trade relations with Southern Africa before joining DG Trade's strategy team. His current responsibilities include general coordination of FTAs and clean trade and investment partnerships. Mr. Verheiden.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I'll have a short introduction on free trade agreements. I also have a short slide which we can put up later on. I just wanted to briefly mention, as by way of introduction, that of course all EU member states are part of the World Trade Organization, in which the EU also speaks with one voice. Originally also EU trade policy was very much focused on the World Trade Organization, and then gradually the focus shifted more and more towards free trade agreements. one of the first free trade agreements that the EU had was in 2011 with Korea. So this is a relatively recent development for the EU. Originally, free trade agreements were very much focused on eliminating tariffs for the imports and exports of goods. Later on, liberalizing trade in services, investments, intellectual property, public procurement, and other areas became more important. And what we see now is very wide and all-encompassing free trade agreements. For instance, those that will be discussed today with the UK and Canada, that cover really a very wide variety of topics, also including, for instance, sustainability or access to critical raw materials. But the slide is essentially saying that we now have a network of trade agreements with 76 countries in the world. It's the largest network of trade agreements of major trade partners in the world. It's a bigger network than that of the US or that of China. We are also the biggest exporter of goods and of services in the world, the number one, and we are the main trading partner for 80 countries in the world, which is a bigger number than those of our main of the biggest partners of the EU. Most recently, we have concluded agreements with New Zealand, Chile, Kenya in recent years. We are continuing to negotiate trade agreements with a variety of countries, in particular with the Mercosur countries, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, also with India and Indonesia. So trade agreements are continue to be discussed and negotiated. Obviously, they will continue to be very important. At the same time, we see a bit of a shift in trade policy. There's now, of course, a new European Commission since a couple of days. So there's not so much we can say about a new trade policy, but from the political guidelines for this commission and for the mission letters, and from the mission letters that individual commissioners received, a couple of things stand out and can be mentioned. First of all, there will be a shift from an almost exclusive focus on free trade agreements to also negotiating other types of trade agreements that are more sectoral. This is already happening. We're speaking about digital trade agreements, more specific investment agreements. There's also a new type of agreements that has been announced, which is called clean trade and investment partnerships, focused on critical raw materials, energy, and clean tech. And also what will be more prominent in trade policy overall is economic security. So our trade policy now has three main pillars: openness, sustainability, and also assertiveness. And assertiveness means that when possible, we cooperate with our trade partners, but when necessary, we act against unfair practices or against coercion, and are ready to enforce our rights as the EU. And this obviously will become more prominent in a global setting where countries tend to be more and more protectionist and more unilateralist. Which means also that the EU will not only be negotiating trade agreements, but will also be adopting and enforcing unilateral EU measures, EU regulations, and also enforcing, of course, trade agreements more forcefully than before in certain cases. But this increased focus on economic security also means, of course, that we want to and need to diversify our imports and our exports. We cannot any longer in the current world afford to be very dependent on certain countries. Here you have a map of trade agreements. By now, the map is slightly outdated. So here it mentions 74 countries. By now we have agreements with 76 countries in place. And of course, there are several agreements still being negotiated. But I was saying that this increased focus on economic security, it means that we need to diversify our imports and our exports. And this also means that trade openness will continue to be very important, and that we will need to conclude new trade deals. So that was my very short presentation, and I wanted to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Verheiden. I understand you need to go, so we will be communicating any questions or we'll be sharing your email.
With pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so very much.
We will continue with the free trade agreement with the UK. And with us, we have Mr. Ignacio Uruarizaga Diaz. He is head of unit trade relations with Europe and Eastern partners of DGT Trade. The unit is notably in charge of negotiating and implementing the trade aspects of agreements in that geographical area. Ignacio has worked for 30 years at the European Commission, always dealing with the external relations of the Union. In the early 90s, he worked on the management of the PHARE program in support of Central and Eastern European countries. Subsequently, he has been handling trade policies such as trade defense instruments, trade in services, and trade in goods, such as rules of origin, technical barriers to trade and tariff negotiations. Before joining the European Commission, Ignacio worked as a business strategy consultant at the Boston Consulting Group in Madrid. He has studied economics in Bilbao and Amsterdam.
The floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to you for inviting us, and thanks to all the organizing team and your ambassador, and indeed all the businesses attending the event today. So it's a pleasure for me to participate. So I will take you quickly through the agreement with the UK, some key features, and then I'm mindful of the of the fact that we are a little bit behind schedule. They will try to run you through quickly some of the key features of the agreement and put a bit of emphasis on SMEs. And then I cannot stay until the end of the presentation because I have another meeting, but I will be more than happy to take any questions, maybe during the presentation or so, directly after that. I mean, with pleasure. So basically, the FTA with the UK is a very peculiar product in the before my colleague Jan-Willem Verhegen was presenting the different FTAs that the union has. In all of those FTAs, the union was trying to enhance market access with a third country. The agreement with the UK is peculiar because it was negotiated at the end of a divorce process, as you all recall, with Brexit. So in a sense, we were trying to have an excellent agreement, and we have an agreement with the UK which as an FTA is an excellent agreement, but an agreement that cannot replicate, of course, the market access, the reciprocal market access that we enjoyed before Brexit. So the agreement that we have with the UK does not ensure frictionless trade because products have to go through customs controls, look at origin, look at SPS requirements, etc. So there are controls which are necessary with a third country, even if we have an FTA, something that was not necessary before the UK left the Union. We have, potentially divergent rules for industrial products. Divergence has been very limited with the UK since Brexit in terms of regulatory frameworks for different industrial products traded, but potentially that divergence could grow, and the agreement, of course, an FTA cannot prevent that from happening because the UK now is a sovereign, separate country. Today, unlike when the UK was part of the Union, we have to certify products in the importing country, and I will elaborate on that. So in the importing country. So if the UK wants to export a product to the Union following Brexit, and despite the trade and cooperation agreement, they have to come to the Union to certify a product that requires third-party certification. That is not the case necessarily for all products exported from the Union to the UK, because the UK is unilaterally accepting, for a wide range of industrial products, the CE marking, so the certification of the product in the Union. Given our size, the UK has opted for accepting our certification for export to the UK without necessarily having to go to the UK and certify the product again in the UK market. But the other way around doesn't work. So the UK, when exporting to the Union a product that requires third-party certification, they have to certify the product in the Union as a third country, which is what the UK is today. There are controls on SPS requirements for foodstuffs, on, let's say, on services. The UK no longer enjoys the passport, the single passport for financial services. So, if they want to operate in different member states, they have to seek authorization. So if a UK bank wants to operate in different member states, it has to seek authorization in the different member states where it seeks to operate. Whereas within the Union, it is enough to obtain authorization in one member state to be able to operate in all member states without needing an additional authorization in the different other additional member states. In the case of the UK, there is no, as before, automatic recognition for some professional qualifications like architects or doctors, etc. Something that we enjoyed reciprocally when the UK was a member of the Union. So we have lost quite a lot of the market access that we all enjoyed before the Brexit, but the FTA that we have with the UK is still an excellent agreement. In many respects, it's the best agreement we have with a third country. So we have zero tariffs and zero quotas with the UK, provided that the rules of origin of the TCA are respected. And this is the only agreement with a third country where we have that. I mean, we have still tariffs with the European Economic Area. So for Norway, we still have tariffs on fishery products, on agricultural products. We have we don't have 100% coverage of tariff elimination with Japan or with Canada, etc. So in many respects, the agreement with the UK is excellent, and we had that from day one. We have a very high level of market access of services and investment, which is not, of course, comparable to what we had when the UK was member of the Union, but it is comparable to the best FTAs we have with third countries. I mean, we were using oftentimes the EU-Japan agreement as a reference to when we were negotiating with the UK. The commitments we have on public procurement with the UK are unprecedented. I mean, we have a very broad coverage of entities and sectors. And in addition, we have a feature, which is a novelty in the agreement with the UK, which is that any European country established in the UK cannot be discriminated when it comes to public procurement, irrespective of the sector, irrespective of the size of the contract. So provided that you are established in the UK, you cannot be discriminated compared to any other UK company. So these are examples of the features of the trade and cooperation agreement when it comes to trade, which in my view qualifies the TCA as an excellent FTA, but as I said at the beginning, it cannot replace membership in the Union. I will say a few words on how implementation is going. I mean, implementation of the TCA is running pretty smoothly with the UK, and I will be more than happy, of course, to receive input from the participants to this webinar in terms of barriers that they may be encountering in the UK when trading, so that will be useful information. But overall implementation is going pretty well. We have some issues though with the UK. I mean, we have one issue with the so-called sponsorship scheme in the UK. So when a service supplier from Greece wants to go to the UK to provide a service, in principle, the company that is hiring them, not as an employee, but hiring them as a service supplier for X number of weeks, has to sponsor that service supplier for the service supplier to be able to go to the UK. We consider that is a barrier that is unnecessary, and that is a barrier that is more geared towards migration, but not for the provision of services across the border. So we are tackling that issue and discussing that issue with the UK. There are some issues with the introduction by the UK of border controls. I mean, the UK as a sovereign third country has the right to introduce border controls to our products. They have been doing that progressively, but in introducing the border controls, we think that they could do better. I mean, they could be more predictable. They could announce the changes that they are, or the controls that they are introducing with more time, be more predictable, communicate that better. We also think that there are some issues of proportionality in terms of the charges they are applying for low risk animal products. They charge a fee for potential controls on animal products entering into the UK, and those fees also are applicable to low risk products, and we have an issue with that we are discussing with our UK counterparts repeatedly. We follow up very closely subsidies in the UK. We are very concerned of the UK, subsidizing operations in a way that attract investments from the Union into the UK, and we follow that closely, in particular, but not only in respect of subsidies to the energy sector in the so-called contracts for difference auctions. We are also following very closely everything that relates to level playing field beyond subsidies, things like labor rights, environment, etc. The agreement with the UK is very novel in respect of level playing field. We have a very detailed and comprehensive chapter that seeks to ensure that on a number of areas, on labor, environment, climate, etc., the UK does not regress from the levels of protection that prevailed before the UK left the Union, to ensure that there is no sort of competition based on lowering protections, standard protections or standards of protection in the UK, on environment, on labor, etc. And we follow all that very closely. We had quite a lot of issues with the previous government in terms of labor rights, where we thought that several relaxation of labor rights in the UK would have an impact on the conditions of competition as foreseen in the TCA. We had a discussion with the UK. Now some of those issues are being removed with the new government, but we will be discussing those with the UK very soon. We are very happy to see that the preferences, and I have mentioned that we have zero tariffs and zero quotas in the UK. That is subject, of course, to meeting the rules of origin for the different products, but we are satisfied to see that the use of the preference in our exports to the UK is very high. So the bulk of more than 90% of our exports to the UK benefit from the preferences offered by the TCA, which means that our exporters, provide information to prove that the products exported to the UK actually meet the rules of origin of the TCA. So that is pretty satisfactory, and we thank all the economic operators in making the effort to do so. So overall, a very satisfactory implementation of the TCA, but with some issues that require, additional discussion with the UK. We have had different trade committees. We have every year trade committees in trade specialist committees on a large number of areas, on technical barriers to trade, on sanitary and phytosanitary issues, on customs and rules of origin, on VAT, on services and investment, on public procurement, on IPR, and on regulatory cooperation. So we have a lot of trade specialist committees. We just had them all in the month of September, October, and the beginning of November. Now we will have next week what I call the Committee of Committees, the Trade Partnership Committee, to which all the other trade specialist committees report. And we will go through some of the irritants that I have just mentioned. We will go through them with our UK colleagues at that meeting. Now, the agreement also includes some specific provisions on SMEs, and we are mindful of the fact that a lot of the companies participating today are SMEs. So we have a Title 7 of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement devoted to SMEs that foresees several features in terms of information for SMEs, etc. It establishes a contact point between the two executives, between the UK government and the Commission, to have exchanges that to ensure that we address SME needs as they may arise. During the committees, with the UK, we often raise together issues related to SMEs. I mean, this year, for instance, to take this as an example, both in the Committee on Regulatory Cooperation and on the Committee on Intellectual Property Rights, we were touching upon the issue of cooperation on the SMEs, and we were exchanging, for instance, all the different approaches to regulatory approaches to facilitate the operation of SMEs in the two constituencies, so in the UK and the Union, to cross-fertilize our respective practices. So we were exchanging on regulatory burden reduction, the approaches of the UK and the Union, on access to finance for SMEs, on the access to skills and mobility and talent mobility on the two sides, and then on support to SME growth. That we discussed at the Committee on Regulatory Cooperation. Then at the Committee on Intellectual Property Rights, we were also exchanging, our practices related to SMEs. I mean, for instance, we were explaining what the SME Fund and the actions that we are taking to support several IP-related activities for SMEs, on registration of IPR, on lawyers' fees to register IPRs, on litigation to defend IPRs, etc. So we was an exchange of information on best practices. We also exchanged on the interesting issue of raising awareness to banks on the valuation of intellectual property when it comes to obtaining, for instance, loans that the intellectual property value can be used as collateral, so to facilitate access to finance by SMEs. And we were basically exchanging information on exchanging our respective practices in a way that hopefully can help us, all of us, to do better in facilitating the development of SMEs and facilitate trade by SMEs. So that is all I wanted to say today. And as I said, we will be more than happy to answer questions, if now or if later, if they can be brought to us by the organizers. And beyond questions, I would also like to reiterate our open door to hear problems that your operators may be encountering when trading with the UK, beyond, of course, the fact that the UK is not a member of the Union, so it's obvious that we have to go through border controls that we didn't have to undergo before. But if there is any information on particular aspects where your exporters consider that the agreement with the UK is not being properly applied or implemented in any way, please contact us directly or contact us hopefully through the organizers or through the Greek administration. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. If you can stay till the end of the webinar for the Q&A session. Okay, so we have a question. I don't know if you can answer it in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we will send it to you.
Let's try.
It regards agricultural products as well as cannery produces. What are the procedures and barriers in order to import to the UK from Greece? And also how this is compared to other countries, third countries like India, which is the second biggest producer worldwide of fresh agro-commodities, is the question.
The procedures to export to the UK for agricultural products are not different are not significantly different to the procedures to export agricultural products to any other third country, with the caveat that in the case of the UK, which is not the case for India, for instance, you have the possibility of obtaining, of avoiding the payment of import tariffs in the UK, which is not the case in the case of India, where you have to pay the most favored nation tariff of India. In the case of the UK, you can obtain a free, not to avoid the payment of a tariff, but for that you have to prove that your product meets the rules of origin included in the TCA. That you can do, there is one tool in our access to markets database, which is called ROSA, where the operator in question or any other Greek operator can get into that. You can access to that through the Europa webpage of the European Union and try the ROSA tool, which through a set of questions guides the exporter to see whether the exporter meets the rules of origin of the TCA. That is not binding information. That is information that may be useful for the operator. And then based on that information, the operator may decide to export to the UK and try to obtain zero tariffs for its exports. That the operator cannot obtain in India because there is, we are subject to the MFN tariffs of India because we don't have an FTA with them yet. In other respects, of course, the exporter has to prove that it meets the SPS requirements of the UK if there are specific SPS requirements for the product in question.
Great. Thank you so much. Actually, the question was comparing to imports from India to the UK, but we will encourage Mr. Haritos, who asked the question, to send it to you, and we will share the webpage and the email. Sorry?
Yeah, though, if I may, sorry, that because the name is...
Very quickly, please. Yes.
Of course, the UK doesn't have a free trade agreement with India. So the UK applies to India today. In May, the UK is, as much as the Union is negotiating with India, the UK is also negotiating a free trade agreement with India, but there is no free trade agreement with India between India and the UK today. So an Indian product exported to the UK has to pay the MFN duty of the UK, something that a Greek exporter doesn't have to do, provided that the Greek exporter meets the rules of origin of the TCA. So if a product in the UK is subject to a 10% MFN tariff, and an Indian exporter would have to pay that tariff, whereas the European exporter would not have to pay that tariff if it meets the rules of origin of the TCA, because as I said during the presentation, the TCA foresees a zero tariff, zero quota for all products when exporting from the Union to the UK, provided we meet the rules of origin. Whereas India is subject to the WTO tariffs of the UK, which by and large are very similar to ours. The MFN tariffs of the UK, with some exceptions, are the same as the MFN tariffs of the Union vis-a-vis the countries.
Thank you very, very much. We will address more questions in the end.
No, thank you very much. Now we will move on to the free trade agreement with Canada. We have with us, and we have her with us at Enterprise Greece, since she's in Greece these days. Mrs. Paulina Weisner, she is Deputy Head of Unit for USA and Canada Trade Relations at the European Commission's Directorate General for Trade. She helps coordinate the EU's transatlantic trade relations and notably oversees the implementation of the EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA. Pauline is a highly experienced EU official with over 20 years of professional experience on EU policymaking in the public and private sector, with a strong expertise in EU trade policy and negotiations, strategic communication, and international economic relations. From 2019 to 2022, Pauline was a member of the Cabinet of European Internal Market Commissioner Thierry Breton, advising him on trade and international issues. She has previously been Deputy Head of Unit at DG DG Trade for Services and Digital Trade. Between 2012 and 2014, Pauline was posted to Athens for the EU Task Force for Greece to provide advice to the Greek government for reforms in the areas of trade, customs and investment environment. Prior to joining the European Commission in 2008, she worked as a public affairs consultant and in corporate affairs and strategic communications. She holds degrees from King's College, London, and the London School of Economics. Besides German, her mother tongue, she is fluent in English, French, and Greek.
Thank you for being here. The floor is yours. I will now switch to English. It will be easier for me.
So we've already heard quite a bit today of other agreements, and I'm glad to talk a bit about our agreement with Canada today, which is in fact one of the agreements that has been extremely beneficial to Greece in particular as well. It was actually interesting when I prepared also for this to look again at the specific outcome and the benefits of CETA to Greece. So I'll get to that, I think. Just to set a bit the context again, CETA is an agreement that we have had for a while now. So it was actually started, the negotiations, in 2009. And I was originally also part of the team negotiating this on services and investment issues. And it was concluded in 2014, so 10 years ago. But at the time, it was really also one of our most ambitious agreements back then and comprehensive. And it was also the first agreement the EU had ever concluded with a G7 partner, so a large and developed partner. It has also put in place a very deep cooperation with Canada on which we've built, and I will get to that just to illustrate. It's one of the agreements with the biggest structure that we've put in place. We have 19 committees and dialogues where all this work is basically happening to implement the agreement. And that also enable us to really engage with Canada if there are issues, if our companies have problems. And I think this is really what makes the agreement alive, actually. The agreement has now been applied for 7 years. So since the 21st of September 2017, it is so-called provisionally applied. And that is actually also an important point to emphasize, because CETA is still awaiting full ratification by all EU member states at the national level. So it was accepted by all European countries in Brussels, in the Council and the European Parliament to be provisionally applied. But it contains some elements that are of mixed competence on investment and investment protection that are not yet in force. They will only be in force once all 27 EU member states have ratified it also through national parliaments. And important just to also say that Greece is one of the 10 member states that has not yet ratified CETA fully. And this is also something that is important overall, because as I said, it means there are some parts that are not in force yet. And it also means that there's certain limits, I think, to how we can maybe at one point modernize this agreement or look to the future. And ratification is very important. And so we also always say that it remains important to ratify it. And this is especially also the case for Greece, which has really benefited a lot. Ignacio talked a lot also about the separate benefits in the UK agreement. I think you'll see a very similar picture here in some respects. It's of course a different situation with a partner that is much further away, so a North American partner. But it is an extremely ambitious trade agreement that covers also a wide range of areas. And today we have eliminated 99% of tariffs on goods. And this has really created new market access for European exporters. especially in certain sensitive areas where Canada has quite a restrictive approach to the market. An important example there is, for example, dairy, so cheese, for example, which is a very important Greek product as well, where Canada has usually quotas and has very high tariffs. And here the agreement has really given us additional tangible benefits that also Greece is really using. And I'll get to that. I've highlighted a couple of things out of here because basically, I mean, we have the whole range of the agreement, which covers similar to what we've heard also from the UK agreement. But important also an innovation in the Canada agreement, for example, is how far we want to go in regulatory cooperation. And that includes, for example, really reducing bureaucratic burdens when it comes to certification, mutual recognition of conformity assessment, for example, which is very important for machinery and exporters when you have especially these kind of products. So, and that is something we're also expanding. Another area where CETA has really brought about a landmark change in the Canadian market is the area of intellectual property. And here, particularly geographical indications. And this is a topic that's very important to Greece as well. This includes the protection of products such as feta, for example. And this was actually something that did not exist in the Canadian market at all before we negotiated CETA. And in fact, Canada was very skeptical about this. They had always had a position against it, like the United States as well. And through CETA, we managed to convince them to allow a new system of geographical indications in the Canadian market. They changed their trademark law for that after they agreed to CETA. And it now includes protection for 171 GIs in Canada. And in fact, you can also protect new GIs in Canada because they created this new system. So that's really a major benefit. Also unprecedented access to public contracts in Canada, public procurement, where European companies can bid for public works and public contracts. This is also something where we have a lot of additional access. And in the area of services, there is also a really ambitious coverage. And notably, we have just now, last month actually, finalized the first ever bilateral EU agreement with a trading partner on mutual recognition of professional qualifications for architects. This is really a landmark agreement. It will facilitate architects wanting to offer their services in Canada or vice versa to have their profession recognized. And this is the first time ever we've done something like that. And the first time Canada has done something like that in a trade agreement. Just a few highlights. So I think what's important to focus on also is really, you know, what has been the contribution of CETA and how are the benefits, and notably also to Greece. What we've seen now in the 7 years since CETA has been applied is that EU-Canada trade has grown by 65%. So really significantly. In services, it's around 62%, also a lot. And I think this really shows how strong, you know, this agreement has contributed. And actually, if we're looking at it overall, so we, the EU, are Canada's third largest trading partner, and they are the EU's 19th largest partner. But it's really part also of diversifying trade for both of us. And what we've seen is that it has been a mutual success story in that respect. We've really seen a big increase in many areas. And what has been particularly interesting, I think, is the role of SMEs in all of that, because we've done some specific study lately. And in fact, what we've seen is that above all, the number of exports has gone up in the area of SMEs. This is really a lot. In fact, 88% of EU exporters to Canada were SMEs, and they're growing much faster than large companies exporting to Canada. And this is, of course, particularly important to Greece, where a lot of companies are SMEs. And these figures are really very, very stunning. In fact, what we've also seen, I think, is that Greece is really among the top countries. In fact, it's probably the 6th country or so in the EU in terms of having expanded its exports and trade to Canada. Our latest figures are even higher in terms of how much Greece has expanded its trade with Canada. The bilateral trade between Greece and Canada is up by 91% compared to pre-CETA 2016. So really a tremendous increase. Greece has a trade surplus in basically most sectors with Canada. It has doubled it since it came into force. And this is in particularly strong in the agro-food sector. So we can see that this is really an area where CETA has clearly provided new market access and also new possibilities. Also to mention that all of this has also had a very positive effect on investment. And today, Canada is Greece's number 8 foreign direct investor, just after the US and China. So among the top 10 foreign direct investors. And that is, of course, a testament, I think, to the kind of potential that an FTA can bring also to a country like Greece. And we've picked out a couple of the success stories because it's always interesting to see some of the products. Some I think people have in their mind. Feta cheese is one of them, for example. But for example, I was very interested to also see that Greece is now the number 1 source of kiwi fruits in Canada. It's become the largest exporter. And there are also other products that are important, like aluminium doors and windows, for example, which has seen a huge increase. I think this is really important also to look at. We had also looked at this at one point comparatively, and I think what we've seen is that in comparative terms between the different more recent FTAs in comparison with some of the recent Asian FTAs, for example, CETA has really been the one that has boosted Greek trade the most. So I think this is quite significant in terms of what we've seen for the benefits. I will go on to that. Maybe to say a few words also about how this functions and how it works, because I think that's important also where you come in. As I said already, I mean, the agreement covers the entire range of trade in goods and services, procurement, intellectual property. And all of this is basically worked on through 19 committees and dialogues. And this is where we can raise specific issues we have over market access, over implementation, over issues that our companies experience on the ground. And one example is the protection of the geographical indication of feta, which in the past, has been sometimes an issue because also the Canadian system is quite different. But what it really allows us is to discuss with the Canadians how to solve any kind of issue. And what is also important is that we hear back from you, from companies who actually are using CETA or who want to use CETA and who are maybe experiencing problems to use it properly or in their actual experience on doing business in Canada. All of this works towards an annual ministerial meeting, so the level of commissioner on the EU side and the Minister of Trade in Canada. The last one took place in February 2024, and the next one will be in spring 2025. So it's also an important cycle where now we're looking also towards that to see what are the key issues that we want to focus on. And all of that, in fact, is a big focus of ours right now. As I said, 7 years of CETA being provisionally in place. We're currently undertaking an in-depth ex-post evaluation of CETA. So we have an external contractor who's doing a study that looks at all aspects of CETA and what have been the benefits, what are the challenges maybe. Together with public consultations, and we actually, the contractor did a seminar recently also in that included also Greece, and the public consultations have been extended, so you also have the opportunity to provide your input, and I'm sure we'll be happy to send around the link to participants, because there's even one that's specifically targeting SMEs. And, you know, this is essential for us also, because we want to have also your views and hear about any problems that there are. Because I think CETA, you know, and any of these trade agreements, we need to see them as a basis for cooperation, especially with third country partners further away. So it's an opposite situation to what we have created, of course, with the UK, which used to be an EU member state. Canada is a North American country, but it is also a very important partner. Notably, Canada has a very important role when it comes to energy and raw materials. It's a very reliable partner of ours as well on all sorts of areas. And so over the last years, building on CETA, we're also taking this cooperation to the next level with partnerships on raw materials, on digital, on green issues, on research and innovation, and economic security and security and defense. So areas, some of them going beyond trade cooperation. But a lot of this is really possible also because we have this ambitious trade agreement. And so we should also understand that besides, you know, the day-to-day opportunities that the agreement gives, it also has a bigger purpose, which is to, you know, strengthen also our mutual economic interests and help us diversify our trade. And I think that's particularly important in the current situation where there's a lot of volatility also happening in terms of trade, and where an agreement like CETA can actually help us have this kind of stable and deep relationship. And this is really something why it's important, and why we also keep advocating for full ratification of CETA. But I think I'll leave it at that, and then see whether there are any specific questions on some areas of CETA.
Thank you so very much. Actually, we have one, and it's very, very specific. It reads, when is CETA going to cover meat products?
Meat products?
Yes.
It already does. So CETA today also covers exports, bilateral trade in meat products. Now, this is an area where trade is dealt, where we haven't gotten rid of all tariffs entirely, but we have quotas. So there are certain amounts that you can export for preferential tariff rate. What's important, of course, in areas like meat is that in order to export a meat product to Canada, it will have to comply with Canadian phytosanitary standards and the kind of standards that apply in the meat sector. In general, that's actually the case for food products, of course. In fact, what we see is that from our end, from the European Union side, we are using the quotas that we have gotten, and there are exports happening to Canada. It's interesting, though, to note that Canada is not exporting to the EU what it could be exporting under the quotas, notably on beef. And that's for a simple reason. They have not, producers in Canada have so far chosen not to adjust their production methods to our phytosanitary standards. So Canadian beef that is not produced in line with our phytosanitary standards cannot be exported. And so there's very limited export that's happening from Canada to the EU, whereas we are actually exporting quite a lot to Canada.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Feinzil. We'll move on to the next part. We have a question that I think is addressed, actually will be able to be answered by the next part.
We have a question that Mrs. Popova could answer. Our speaker is Mrs. Popova that started to work in the EU in 2007 in things about the European Committee. In 2009 she was in the market access and the DigiTrade. And one of our questions is where someone can address for trading fictions experiencing with the UK at the moment. And I think that these issues about can be addressed to you, right?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar where I would like to present you the tool that DigiTrade created. It's called Access to Markets, and it is a web portal created for the users to navigate through, not only those two trade agreements, but it is created to help navigate through the trade world, to different trade concepts, to give information about all possible trade questions. I saw in the chat that there is one question about Greek marble to Canada. So I was thinking to give example how to export olive oil to Canada, but now I will replace it with the Greek marble. The online portal Access to Markets was created in end of 2020, combining two previous existing websites. One was for imports and one was for exports. So it is focused on EU users in general. So you can check how to export or import from the EU into third countries, or from the third countries into the EU. You can also select a country, like in my case, I will go online after the presentation and I will show you with examples from Greece to Canada or UK, and from Canada and UK to Greece. The idea behind the portal is on one hand to show you information about each product, so tariff, taxes, different procedures, how to trade the product. It is also to have one unique web portal where you can have information about goods, about services, about procurement, about all possible questions that you might have, and about all possible concepts in trade. It is also, we hope it is really user-friendly, and it is available in all EU languages. It is also free to use. Who can use it? At the beginning, so the main target are the small and medium enterprises, but of course it can be used by trade promotion organizations, different business associations, everybody who is interested in trade in general. So what sort of information you can find on Access to Markets? You can find information on specific product, about tariffs, taxes, rules of origin, different procedures, trade barriers, trade statistics, procurement information, and services information. You can also find information about all those things, what they are, the general concepts behind. So not only the specific for each product, but also explanation on what is it, what are the tariffs, what is rules of origin, what are trade barriers, etc. Also, what you can find on access to markets is information about the EU trade agreements. I will show you the page where it is. You can find it based on country, that you can search based on country, or you can see also the trade agreements. It informs about how to export to 135 export markets. So you select your product and then you can see this information on 135 export markets. And if you are an importer into the EU, you can check how to import from different countries in the world. How do we provide this information? We have created a tool called My Trade Assistant, and this My Trade Assistant provides you help to search for your product on goods. You can also check the rules of origin. We have created the rules of origin self-assessment tool, where following some questions, you can assess your product. We have the My Trade Assistant on services and investment. On procurement. On procurement, you can check if you can participate to tenders abroad. And also you can check, since June this year, you can check if third countries' entities are eligible to participate in tenders within the EU. The other tool that we have created is the single entry point, where you can send us information about problems that you are facing in your trading process. And also we have created one tool about the export restrictions imposed by Russia and Belarus following the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We have also this single entry point tool that I mentioned. I will show you where it is on the portal itself. It is a unique contact point for market access issues and violations of sustainability commitments that you may face in your day-to-day trading work. Everyone can lodge a complaint if based within the European Union. It could be an industry, it could be an NGO, and it could be a company, and it could be just a citizen. We have a pre-notification process where you can send us an email asking in advance, telling us what you are facing, and we can explain how to create your complaint online. How does it work? You send us our complaint, we identify the problem, there is an exchange about your complaint. And we create a team within our DG that assesses the complaint and that communicates with the complainant. Here you can see better the whole process. At the end of the process, that is the internal discussion, the contacts with the complainant, exchange of information. There is either we assess that there is a trade barrier, that there is no trade barrier, or if we assess that there is a trade barrier, and the Commission starts working to solve this barrier. Before launching the complaint, you can check online if the barrier that you are, if the problem that you are facing is already existing barrier. So now I will close my presentation and I will go online to show you in reality how this works online. So on the home page, as you can see here above, you have many tabs, and this is the part where when I mentioned that you have information about all type of trade, general main trade concepts. So in the tab for goods, for example, you have As you can see, you have export, how to import, several guides. You have also explanation on main concepts about goods, custom tariffs, taxes, rules of origin, product requirement. This is a general explanation. Here is the part where when I mentioned that you have information about trade statistics. So on this page here, you can find information about trade statistics. With different EU countries, you can select only one EU country, or you can select the EU as a whole, and you can select also the country that you are looking for about the statistics. Let's say if we select Canada, and if we select, let's say, olives in 23, but you can see that I mean, we have the statistics go back to 2002. Search, okay, doesn't find my HS code. I can find the HS code easier here at the beginning, my trade assistant. So I will go back to the statistics when I explain to you how to export and import different products. Before doing that, I wanted also to continue to show you so the general concepts about services are in the tab for services, investment, procurement, and markets. So, okay, there is one general explanation about the EU single market. And under non-EU markets, this is where you can find information on the EU trade agreements, or you can also search country by country. I can type Canada. And you can see the explanation about the CETA agreement on access to markets. You can also here on the right side in the navigation panel, you can go under the different explanations about the different chapters of the trade agreements. I will go back to the home page to show you this tool that I said, the My Trade Assistant, where you can find information on each and every product. So let's take the example. I wanted to take the example for olives, but let's go to the marbles. So we put marble, we don't know the HS code, the harmonization system code. We put marble, then we select Greece, and then we select Canada. So what information okay, here, if you know the HS code, you go directly with the number. If you don't know the HS code and I typed marble, you can select the product from the tree of the harmonization codes numbers. So I click on the marble, and this is my result page. This is the code, the HS code that I was looking for. And now here you can see the result page. You can see the tariffs that you will have. In this case, it's 0%. We have the preferential rate. You have here also the rules of origin self-assessment tool. So you click here and you access the tool. When you click start, you have, it is your assessment. So you reply to the different questions that you need to follow in order to check if your product can benefit and originates or not. If you don't know why you are asked this question, you click on rule explained, and then you have the explanation of the rule and why you are asked this question. You can continue reading. You can have very detailed information on the rules of origins. Then I go back to my results page. Here you can check different origin documentation and verification that you might need. And you can also check the rules of origins in other countries, in other agreements. Here you select the country and let's say you go to United Kingdom, and you can check different information about the detailed information on United Kingdom. Also on this results page, you have the taxes that you need to pay in the country of export. And you have the different procedures and formalities that you will face. In the overview, you have, okay, it's a general information about all products for these specific countries. You scroll down and you check the different news, if there are new measures about this country. If you click here on general, then you have a general information about this type of products. And if you click here, sorry, on, wait, I lost it, I'm really sorry. I scrolled too quickly. You have also information on different documents that you might need, like import declaration. You have a sample of the declaration itself, of customs invoice. You have a sample of the invoice, etc. And you have also possible, as I mentioned, possible existing trade barriers with this country. And also you have trade flow statistics with the country that you have selected. Mentioning the barriers, I will just go back now to the home page to show you here. You can access the single entry point that I mentioned during my presentation, and you can also, I will click here on existing trade barriers. And here you can check different trade barriers. You can select by country. Let's say this time I will select the UK. Okay, there is one registered barrier. And you can check what is the barrier about. So if you want to launch a complaint, you can see if this already exists as a barrier or not. Also, as if you need to ask questions, so here in our contact form, you can ask a question either about the problem that you have encountered while navigating in the access to markets, but you can also ask us a question about the product, about what you need to know. And if you want to reach the single entry point for trade barrier, you click on in the yellow field. You have the explanation, what is it, the single entry point. Here you have guidelines translated in all EU languages about how to fill in the market access complaint form about the problem that you are facing. And you scroll down and here you start filling information about the company, that we keep it into confidentiality, and information about the trade barrier, the trade problem that you are facing. Also, I would like to announce now that my unit is organizing trainings on access to markets every 3 or 4 months. And next one is on the 10th of December. So if you want, you can, okay, it's on the homepage, you click and you can follow the links to register. I wanted also to give one example. I think it was Pauline who mentioned access to conformity. So I will take one example with a vacuum cleaner, with the machinery from Greece to Canada, just to show you how the tool access to conformity works. So again, I don't know the number of my product. I go to vacuum cleaners. I select, I want to search for it, and I select one of the options according to what I'm searching for. So I have selected a product that needs to assess its conformity. I go to the conformity tool, And here I can check the information about the mutual recognition that we have with Canada. And then I scroll down and I can check the different entities where I can check the conformity of my product. Okay, with this, I will finish my presentation, and I am open for questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Popova. We're going to move on to the next unit. So in the end, we will only have the people who want to pose questions because we're a bit behind schedule. So in the third unit, we're going to see an industry case study with Mr. Fanis Matsopoulos, who's going to share his experience with exports to these countries. Mr. Matsopoulos is CEO at Universal Carriers SA with expertise in shipping, global economy, and investment analysis. He holds an MSc in shipping and serves as a columnist for Forbes International. He is an elected member of the board of directors at the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Matsopoulos.
Dear all, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude for being here next to so many esteemed guests. As member of the board of Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we represent more than 100,000 companies, and we are highly interested in assessing problems and obstacles that the Greek companies, and especially the small and medium-sized, face in order to enter a market. So I would like to thank all of the hostess about the invitation, and I would concentrate on the case of Canada. Since UK is still, in my opinion, under a transitory phase due to the Brexit, I will analyze very, very briefly, just not to make mad all of our attendees. Two things. The first one, the Greek FETA case. The CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, as previously mentioned, is a free trade agreement between Canada and the EU. One of its objectives, as anyone can understand, is to reduce the trade barriers and foster exports between the two regions. Now, in our case, in Greece, the feta cheese. Why is it important for us? Because it is a traditional Greek product, integral to country's cultural and economic heritage, protected under the EU Protected Designation of Origin, PDO status. Now the Canadian market. It's a huge market for the Greek feta cheese, and which has been facing growing popularity among Canadian consumers. So when the CETA agreement previously, prior to the existence, there were Canadian tariffs on European cheese more than 250%. Under the CETA, all of these tariffs were eliminated and specific quotas took their place. So the Greek feta cheese was highly benefited by the implementation of the CETA agreement. On the other hand, there was a quota system that was applied and which allowed only a specific quantity of duty-free access to a fixed EU cheese quantity, including the Greek feta. However, this quota is shared across of many EU producers, creating competition and among EU member states. Now it's the case that all of us must pay attention. It's the naming and branding restriction. While the PDO protected Greek feta cheese rights to the feta name in Europe under the CETA, Canadian producers who market feta prior to the agreement were also allowed to call their products in such way. So the competition rise. Today, since we are talking about free trade agreements, the CETA gave opportunities to Greek exporting companies, which include tariff reductions that have boosted Greek feta export. So this works very good. It's very good for us, very beneficial. Increasing awareness of the authentic feta, which created a niche market for Greek products in Canada. But there were also some challenges. The competition rise, the Canadian domestic feta style, in quotations, remained cheaper, limiting market share growth to Greek feta, and branding limitations dilute the distinctiveness of Greek feta. In conclusion, the CETA agreement, as every free trade agreement, opened the Canadian market to the Greek feta, though reduced tariffs, challenges persist due to the quota restrictions and competition from Canadian and other EU producers. To maximize benefits, Greek exporters must pay attention, must invest, in my opinion, in educating the Canadian consumers about the authenticity of this unique product. So we keep in mind that the free trade agreement between EU and Canadian about the cheese gave life to many Greek companies that produce and export our beloved feta cheese. And now, also very briefly, I would like to mention the impact of the CETA agreement to the Greek shipping industry. Key effects. Why is it so important? First of all, when you have a trade agreement, the barriers between two or more countries are limited, and consequently, the quantities that will be moved from point A to B will increase. So since we have more goods to be transported, the demand for vessels also increases. So this is very beneficial for the Greek shipping community. On the other hand, we have also the CETA that moved away all of the provisions and the limitations about specific cargo operations that took place in ports. So the Greek ships also became more eligible in order to call ports and provide their services. Last but not least, all of the embargoes, not the war embargoes, the cabotage that existed, were also lifted. So Greek vessels could easily transport goods within the Canadian territory, which meant that the market share also grew for the Greek shipping companies. In conclusion, Ms. Ioannou, because I know that we are out of time and I want to be as brief as possible, free trade agreements usually boost bilateral trade relations, but in our case, the feta cheese and the shipping industry, but the Greek companies must be aware that the competition consequently rises and they must be ready in order to provide unique services or at least highly differentiated than other similar products or services. The CETA agreement between EU and Canada has given more than 500 million euros in pure export values in Greek goods among aluminium, food, yogurt, and cement. So I believe they're highly beneficial, and in my opinion, as representative of the Chamber of Commerce of Athens, we are strongly fan of this. We want them, and we want to be all of these agreements to cover as many countries as possible. I would like to thank you for the honor to invite me here, and if there's any questions, feel free to ask me.
Let us move on to Mrs. Makripidi that will give us a summary of what we've heard today. Ms. Makripidi is a second Councillor for Economic and Commercial Affairs, is a Trade Policy Committee Deputy for Greece. She's joined Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Greece in 2006. She has served in various directorates in the MFA includes strategic management, bilateral economic relations, and international development cooperation in the Greek Embassy in London. Ms. Makroupidi, the floor is yours. So, hello from me, and I would like to thank Enterprise Greece for inviting me in this initiative and Enterprise Europe Network for organizing this webinar. And I would like to thank my colleagues in the committee and that helps the extroversion of our enterprises and their eagerness to continue to this cooperation. I'm a member of a team that has to do with diplomacy and common trade policy in the European Union, and part of this this team is in the representative in the EU. And this webinar is the continuation of previous info days, such as Market Access Day, which was organized in collaboration with the Commission a few months ago in Athens, and we will continue. The General Secretary talked about the overall support provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by the Central Service, the authorities abroad, by the offices of trade and commercial relationships. And today we see the support we can receive from Enterprise Greece and EEN, but a prerequisite for offering support to you, and the main message that we want to give you in this webinar, is that we are available to provide information on the available tools to support exports, and at the same time we want feedback on the priorities you have and the markets you're interested in. We also want to know the problems that you face in markets abroad. The colleagues at the Commission very briefly presented the main elements of the FTA and two key FTAs on which we focused. Mr. Matsopoulos presented a case study through the challenges and opportunities presented by a trade agreement, especially as regards the challenges. The answer is always that we need to increase our competitiveness. So allow me to briefly present an overview of what we do. The main issues we discuss are bilateral trade agreement and negotiations in order to sign agreements and the implementation of existing agreements. Our aim is to essentially improve access to markets for services, investments, and products and public procurement. We discuss new regulations and how to handle trade disputes. Based on the main issues that were reported in this discussion, I would like to note the undergoing trade negotiation with third countries. At the moment, we have undergoing negotiations with Indonesia, India, Philippines, and Thailand, and we would like to know the priorities that you're interested in these markets. And as the Commission stated, there are other forms of agreements apart from FTAs, which we believe will be more popular in the near future, which include indicatively digital trade agreements, agreements for sustainable investment, and agreements that they're called clean trade investment partnerships that will aim to offer to third countries a mutually beneficial offering. These are countries that we find it hard to approach otherwise, so it offers a comprehensive approach with preferential access and investment plans, especially in raw materials and technologies. As regards the implementation of the existing agreements, the main points are that there is a promise to translate these agreements into opportunities for Greek businesses by managing barriers and making the most of the terms of the agreements, increasing collaboration with partners
on various regulatory provisions that can increase our competitiveness and our access to foreign markets, the rich tool set of the European Union for the promotion of trade agreements and providing support to SMEs, and the full use of the various measures, which includes dispute resolution measures and tools offered by the European Union, which we can use to protect ourselves from unfair practices in third countries. Trade agreements can be very effective only if businesses know the benefits they offer, and of course the toolkit offered by the European Union, with the European Commission we work closely in Athens, in Brussels and other countries through our representations and offices. As the Ambassador said and the General Secretary stated, we believe that the critical factor for success for increasing competitiveness is a collaboration between the private and public sector. So we are available for you to boost this collaboration even further. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Mrs. Margariti, and thank you for your overall support in the organization, and we hope to see you again soon. We are very happy that we've opened this channel of communication. Just before we finish, I see a question which I will address to all speakers from the European Commission, and I would like to thank you very much for being here with us up to this time. I would like to say that up until a short time ago, we had 80 attendees, which means that people are really interested in this, although it's late now. And despite the fact that the seminar took much longer than expected, there is a question that other people have also posted. If an e-shop from the EU sells in the UK, is all things subject, are parcels subject to customs clearance? Are UK citizens obliged to pay taxes and VAT fees? I don't know if this is too specific, Mrs. Popova, or could we help with this, guide people today regarding this?
Hello, Peter, I see that Peter was on the way to reply, so yeah.
Oh, was I? Okay, well, thank you. No, very pertinent question, and certainly the answer is in our access to market portal. You type in the product, from where to where you want to export, and then you have the conditions, including tariffs and taxes. But in general, the UK is a third country, like India, like Sri Lanka, like Japan. It's no longer part of the European Union. That means exports to the UK will have to pay import duties when imported into the UK, and pay applicable VAT taxes and others, and vice versa. If we import from the UK, these products usually have to pay import duties and are subject to taxes. Of course, our Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, has special preferential rules for many products, in principle duty-free, but certainly there are cases where this is not the case, especially in agriculture. But try our access to market portal, and there you have the very detailed information you need to know, and much more.
Yeah, if I can just add, because I see that it is an e-shop. The question comes from an e-shop and about parcels. So I suppose that you need to check the different products that you are shipping with those parcels. So in general, yes, the parcels are subject to customs clearance, but then you need to check the products in the parcels. You can check this on the Access to Markets page. And as I showed during the presentation, if you don't find the answer, you can always contact us.
There might, of course, be thresholds. We in the European Union have thresholds, the minimum thresholds, below which in value we no import duties are required. This is a big topic at the moment with all these Chinese Temu and Shine parcels coming into the EU, and I'm sure the UK has similar experiences, and the US as well. What to do with this avalanche of Chinese parcels coming which are below the threshold and therefore don't pay import duties, taxes, and in many cases are a risk for public security and health.
Thank you so very much. I would like to cordially thank all of our speakers for being here today and for sharing all your knowledge and for being here to answer all our questions. On this note, I would like to say thank you and good evening, to say also goodbye to our participants from Greece. Σας ευχαριστούμε θερμά που ήσασταν εδώ. Μπορείτε να βρείτε περισσότερες πληροφορίες και στο βίντεο που θα αναρτήσουμε, αλλά και να παρακολουθείτε το newsletter της Enterprise Greece, όπου τα σχετικά ερωτήματα, όπως αυτά που ανέφερε η κυρία Γραμματρυπίδη, απευθύνονται στις μικρομεσαίες επιχειρήσεις και είμαστε στη διάθεσή σας για όποια περαιτέρω απορία. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Καλό σας βράδυ.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you, Elena. Very good event, and we will be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.